You ready? Okay. Okay. So last week we started talking about Kaddish a little bit. We spoke about the Aliyahs, the Shama, etc. Right? And we said we're going to discuss somewhat
We gotta settle this range.
yeah, exactly. We got to settle the inyan of Kaddish being individual or Kaddish being as a group. Now, just to recap what we did last week, we have some newcomers. We said that the original Sephardi minig was for them to say Kaddish as a group. The Kaddish choir is a Sephardi thing originally, originated by the Sephardim, and the reason why it worked by the Sephardim is because much of the Seder Tefillah by the Sephardim is choir style. If you daven in a Sephardi shul, they say a lot more together than Ashkenazim do. There's a lot more of like singing together. It's actually like a point of pride if you talk to Sephardim because it's more gishmak. It's a more enjoyable type of davening than they do it like that. Now the Ashkenazim, who have minimal group participation, right? It's more individual style. So Kaddish also, the old minig, and this was the Ramah in Yeridei and Hilchos brings this down in Shinai and Vav. Minig was to say Kaddish individual, and there was only a limited amount of Kaddishim to go around. There's 4 Kaddishim with Tefillah, at least the earliest minig, and they would fight over them. Now, the way the original Ashkenazi minig develops, it starts with this. The Maril, in the Minhagim Maril, says as follows: Minig Magensa. This is the early Ashkenazi minig called this 500-600 years ago. They don't say Kaddish Yasam every day. They only say Kaddish Yasam on Shabbos. Betzivim Marisegel is Benoi, his 2 sons. Lemer Kaddish Yasam leimay Belel Shabbos. B'Shachrisai uben Maraz Runkel Yom B'Moitzi Shabbos. So the Maril split up. The Maril had two sons from his wife, who predeceased him, and he told them how to say Kaddish on their mother. You do 2, and then you do 1. So here you have all the Kaddishim that are available in an Ashkenazi shuls, 3 Kaddishim, and they have to split them up. And the Ramah Taka, now later on, the minig expands a little bit, and the minig expands to saying Kaddish Yasam every single day, but still by a limited amount of Kaddishim, and the Leket Yosher and the Shumas Hadeshin and others bring down the minig of saying Kaddish every day. But it's pretty limited how much Kaddishim are available, and you fight over them. And the Ramah in Shulchan Aruch brings down Minhagim of who gets what to say the Kedima is, meaning who gets to go first, how many Kaddishim does he get, outsiders, people who pay membership, people who are in default on their membership. No jokes. This is guests to the city versus people who are actually part of the city. Many different dinim, and the Ramah says how you split them up. Now, Shloshim, Shiva, the year, Yartzeit, exactly. All these. Now, some of these things have carryover because today they carry over to who gets the Amid. Not about who gets Kaddish. There's carryover to who gets the Amid. Meaning what to say the difference of who gets the Amid is, and maybe we'll revisit that as part of this discussion. But this is the Ramon. Now, if you look in the Magen Avraham, and I think it's in Mekuf Lamed Aleph and Archaim.
What's the issue of saying it together? Does Ashkenazim have an issue with it?
Right. So let's see this as the fight develops. Let's see. Really, you're onto a good nakuda shvach. It's really hard to know what's so terrible. So this is I'm just trying to chart the course of this minig. So this is the early minig. Then there's fights, and the Ber Hetiv and the Magen Avraham and the Shari Tshuva in Archaim, it's in Kuf Lamed Aleph. The Magen Avraham has something called Kontras Maimer Kaddish, I believe it's called, which is all the in much greater detail who gets what and when and how and what the seder is and what the order is and etc. So there's a whole world of Ashkenazi ticky-tacky minutiae in how to split up the Kaddishim and who gets it and when they get it, and lots of details. You could write a whole sefer of the details of Hilchos Kaddish from back in the day. Now, Lamaisa, we all know that today in most Ashkenazi shuls, we've migrated to the Sephardic minig, and in most shuls in the world, Kaddish is said as a group. Even if there's multiple Avelim, they say it as a group. Now, there's a need in the Paiskim. Is it better for the Avelim to come together in one area and be cohesive and coherent and everyone could hear everybody? Or is it better that each one should stay in their corner and they're so to speak being mitzi different groups? Exactly. Maybe they don't each have a minion, but they each have 3 people, they each have 5 people. Meaning they each one being mitzi minion, and then Adarab, the chaos of them being off by a few seconds, the time of being off for a few seconds is maybe a mila. Because then they're each being mitzi somebody. They're actually being Mekadosh Shem Shemayim. You're actually encouraging a tzibur. It's a small tzibur, but you're encouraging a tzibur to say Kaddish Shem Shemayim, so it's a mila. And this is the machlekes of the Paiskim. Now, there was obviously many fights over who should say Kaddish when and who should go first and etc. And as shuls grew in size, meaning shuls got larger and the membership of a shul got bigger, meaning back in the day in a shtetl, the membership of a shul was small. What do you have? You had a few people in the shul. What's the odds there was more than one avel at the time? Big deal, you figure it out. There's 2 avelim, small minyanim, exactly. But as shuls got larger and you could have 100 members, 200 members, so it's almost impossible. It's invariable that you're going to have groups of Avelim there at the same time, and the fight about who should say it became a very, very pertinent discussion. Now, there's the Aderes, who's Rav Kook's Shver. He was the Rav of Panovich and Mir and then Yerushalayim. Aderes writes, and we touched on this last week when we spoke about the Kalinas, the Kalinas Vart. He says Kaddish is only one of the mitzvahs you could do L'ilui Nishmas your father. There's many mitzvahs a person could do L'ilui Nishmas a parent. One of the most favored mitzvahs that a person could do L'ilui Nishmas a parent is Chesed, and not causing machlekes. And if somebody else really wants the Kaddish, that's a bigger mitzvah than Kaddish. That's what the Adara says. Like one of the most favored mitzvahs you can do, I'll read it. He says, Haben yachal litin rishos gam la'achar she'ena magiya le'al pi adin lahagid Kaddish, asher kol mitzvahs she'aben oisev unachas ruach v'tikkun la'avoisev. Any mitzvah that a son does is a nachas ruach and a tikkun for his father. V'imkein gam mashu marshal la'achar le'mer Kaddish ba'ad vishu oimer hunach shebachal gmilas chasadim. Umitzvah hu oisev. V'zeh shevach v'ilu l'nishmas avoisev. Ubramazaka Abba. Yes, 1 second. Very good. Very good. Very good. So, he's saying good. If your father, he's saying the opposite of you. He's saying exactly. Your father's type would fight for it. Be misakin it by not fighting for it. Exactly. A very interesting point. That's interesting. That's a very nice machlokes over here. But it's interesting. Two brothers. That's a nice machlokes between two brothers. But the Emek Bracha, Reb Aryeh Praman, I can't pronounce his last name this minute. Talmud of Briskerov, who died very young actually, who wrote a few svarim. He was a prodigious Talmud Chacham. He writes that you can't be ein loy lases chesed im chaverei levatel ischusay dekivin das chus huzeh shayach lames. He says you're coming to the mevater and the Kaddish. Kaddish is your father's chus. It's not yours chus. You're trying to help your father. You're trying to help your mother, and you say, "Herzachain, I'm a nice guy. I'm a sheniyid. I don't want to fight with people. I'm being mevater." And somebody else's chus. That's what the Emek Bracha says, which is similar to what you're saying, but fine. Now there is actually a story with Rishal Salanter. I'm gonna guess that this is actually a true story because the details are too exact. In the Sefer Tnuas HaMusar from Rav Dov Katz, which is a very good 5-volume Sefer on all the Muslim movements, there's a story that Rishal Salanter came to Shul to say Kaddish on his father's yahrzeit, and there was a guy there. His name is in the story. That's why I think it's true. A guy whose name was Yitzchak Isaacson, who lost a daughter when she was young, and was there to say Kaddish for his daughter. And he came in and he saw that it's Yisrael's yahrzeit, and Yisrael was, a luminary, a legend, and he figured there's no chance he's getting Kaddish here. Now you see clearly that the minig in Vilna, wherever this happening, was to still do Kaddish individually, right? They were not sharing it. This guy, he got upset. He was sad. He was sad. He said, I'm not going to get Kaddish for Yisrael's here. Yisrael looks at him and he says, what do you mean? Vasais, you're not getting Kaddish? Sure, you could say Kaddish. What's the big deal? Say Kaddish. So the tzibur came over to Yisrael afterwards and they asked him, why are you being vater on this? And Yisrael told them in no uncertain terms that the schus of Gemilas Chasadim is bigger than the schus of Kaddish. This is what Yisrael says. This is in Tnuas HaMusar. If you want to look it up, it's page 374 in, I think, Tnuas HaMusar, volume 1 is about Yisrael. 374, look it up. Yisrael said, and this, I believe it's a true story because there's names. Like there's a name of the person who Yisrael told them, of course you could have it. It's a bigger chesed it's a bigger mitzvah to do chesed than just to take Kaddish. So the machlek is. As a Gabbai,
it's almost worked every time. There's guys who buy Kripsito.
Yeah.
The guy who gives in is the one that has the baby first.
Okay, you see, exactly.
Unrecorded?
Gaboim keep details of stuff like this. This is not, this is Gabois, Gaboim keep details. In any case, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter is L'cher saying as a Meiser Rav, a personal Meiser Rav that's brought down about Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, that he's paskening, so to speak, that it's better to give it up than to fight over it. And like we said last week, someone who we said from the Chasam Sofer who says over in the name of the Shev Yaakov, that somebody who steals a Kaddish from someone else, the guy who steals it gets nothing, and the guy who lost it didn't lose anything. The Chasam Sofer says from the Shev Yaakov. Meaning, if we're talking about Schosim and Shemayim, so the guy who steals it got nothing, the guy who lost it got fine. This is the din. Now, what's Lamaisa, the halacha rationale? Meaning, Avraham was asking, what's the machlekes? Like, what's the big, no thing? So Rabbi Yaakov Emden, who had no problem speaking his mind, and Taka, when he saw something that didn't seem important, he said it. Rabbi Yaakov Emden in his Siddur writes as follows. He says, B'chiluke dinim shel Ashkenazim. The chiluke dinim that the Ashkenazim make in Kaddish, binyan mi hakaydim lamir se Kaddish, mi doich lami, lo yetapel kan. He's writing a Siddur. It's a 2-volume Siddur, a fat Siddur that goes into every tiny rabbit hole, Negei and Tefillah, b'halacha, b'haggadah, b'kabbalah, and everything. He says, this Kaddish Mevucha, I'm not going into it. The Milsa, the Minhaga ba'almahu, ma'toy v'yashem minig asfardim b'zeshem, rabim heim akulam zeichem b'lev, ayim reisek echad. This is a minig thing. It's a headache. It makes fights. Just do what the Svardim do. It's better to just do it as a group. And we'll save ourselves only the Re'akim says. If I says, you'd say I'm a conservative. I'm saying I'm a terrorist. Re'akim writes, it's reams and reams of halacha. Just put them aside and do what the Sfaradim do. It's a good minhag. Which means, i.e., yeah. One second. There's much more. Hang on. This is nothing's ever so cut and dry. And nothing's ever so cut and dry. One second. As I think Re'akim, he says, please, the whole thing's it's a whole to do about not much. Just let it go and don't make fights. As I think Re'akim. Now. There are many that disagreed with him and felt these minhagim were very important, and you can't change them. Now, Lamaisa, we know that Re'akim won. His perspective is the perspective that won out. Meaning, we spoke last week that the reality is that we live in communities that are so large and so populous, and for sure, in recent history, there were so many Yisayim and so many people saying Kaddish at the same time that it just was not possible to do splitting in an amicable fashion. And you'd have to have like a dayan in every shul, special, a Kaddish dayan. Right. Yeah, Kaddish dayan, Paskin Shailas. It would be like, that would be the main job. Each shul would have to have another salary to police this stuff. I'm not talking about small shuls, but large shuls, you have to have another salary to police this stuff. Now, what's interesting is that the Aruch LaNer, it switched somewhere in the Tkufa of Rabbi Shlomo Salanta, let's say, somewhere there, early 1800s, mid 1800s. No, I think that World War II put the final stempel on it because there was so many World War I probably actually. World War I, we don't know.
Europe, right?
Migration.
My wife's grandfather down in nothing. He had a 15-person.
No, but let me tell you something else.
In those days, he still had those.
I'll tell you something else. World War I, we don't talk about World War I because World War II was such a terrible event that it like washed away whatever World War I was. But World War I, if you know the history of World War I, created tremendous flows of people. There were tens of thousands, millions of Jews flowing from one community to another. There was terrible disruption and destruction, and many Yisayim. Now, what happens is the things that create shilas are ribuy of Kaddish. Too many people need to say it. And the second most prevalent component that creates fights is guests and taishavim. Guests versus homeowners. Home payers versus non-payers. These are the two, basement versus upstairs. These are the two most prominent components that create fighting in Kaddish. World War I brought both of those components on steroids. It brought tremendous influx of people who were visitors, guests, yes payers, no payers, poor, rich, ahina, and it also brought a tremendous, unfortunately, Yisayim and an influx of people saying Kaddish. I believe that World War I put the final stempel on this new minhag, meaning the minhag was being pivoted to in the 1800s already. By the time World War I rolled around, it was impossible. Literally, like I said, you'd need a dayan in each shul just to pass it. It was impossible. And World War II, this became the minhag. Now, what's interesting is the Aruch LaNer, who's not a kanoi. Aruch LaNer is not a kanoi. There's plenty of things that you could show him being pretty open-minded to. Is very strongly against sharing Kaddish, against saying it together. I want to read you a discussion. It's the most complete tshuva about this Indian comes to Aruch LaNer. It's like interesting. It's not what you would expect. The tshuva is as follows. They wrote to Mashal like this: Kal ha'achad, Aruch LaNer in Binyan Tzin in this tshuvas.
This whole shayla is only when it's different. What happens when it's like brothers?
They're all together. We hope that they can work it out on their own. But no, it could essentially be the same question because it shouldn't be right. Yeah, you're right. I don't know of any particular child about that. I'm sure that there were brothers who thought about this also. Who was daddy's favorite son? Who got more Yerusha, less Yerusha? You know what I'm saying? Like I'm sure the Binyan Tzins in Tzimkov Chafez, if you want to look it up. Yeah, the Binyan Tzins a whole shleimus degrees. Now Binyan Tzin, the child as follows. They ask him as follows: Kahal Achad that Hoylam Shtei Bat Knesiyos. It's a town that had two shuls. Now this shows you clearly what the underpinning of the shilas are. It had two shuls. Echad Gedayla v'Achas Katana. One big one small one. Vayid Sham Minyanim. And around the town there was more Minyanim, house Minyanim, little shtiblach, etc. Which is how I think we imagine most villages and cities were, back in the day. The main shul got very shvach. Harsu Isa, they knocked it down. Ubanu Beis HaKnesses G'dayla. It doesn't say anything about the charity campaign, but I'm sure, yeah. They built a big Beis HaKnesses. Binyan Nah HaMachuzik Kol B'nei Akil. HaMachzekes Kol B'nei Akil. They built a shul that could hold everybody in it. A terrible idea when you build a shul that could hold everybody. The scheme they agreed. Shalayla Hispal B'Shum Minyan Rak Beis HaKnesses HaChadash Azais. All other minyanim were closed down. This is the shul now. So part and parcel of Shusha Tachana is the only way to make this a tenable arrangement, to make this work, was that they said Kaddish is no longer going to be something you divvy up, because now we're going to have a shul that has 300 members. It's impossible. Kaddish goes like the Sfaradim now. They stood up and they said, "Vaseis, it's alta minig that we split up Kaddish and we don't do this." The Kahala, remember the Kahala's rebuttal is, there'll be fights every day over here. So Veheshavti Lahem, the Shoyal is actually Ber Oppenheim. I don't think he has his own chuvas, but he was a Talmud Chacham of note. He writes to the Aruch LaNer to review the Shaila. He says, they asked me the question, and I passed him like this. He said, I told them, a city, this din that the Ramah says to split up Kaddish is only in a city that has small minyanim, where everybody's davening in little pockets, little groups. I will be Shein Lemrak Beis HaKnesses Echad, B'chol Yom V'yom Sham Avelim Shloshim, the Yartzai Tarbek, K'tei L'mayit Machlekes Tov Sheir Mekulim V'asachas, K'tei L'tavach HaShalom. He says, I'm telling you that even the Ramah didn't mean this. The Ramah was talking about little shuls. Big shuls, even the Ramah's maskim, they all have to say it together, no splitting it up. And now he says, V'anoichi ha'yedeya, and this is great, Enkel Chadash Tachas HaShemesh, Anoichi ha'yedeya ve'eid. Rebber Oppenheim says, I know and I'm an aid. Hirisi pamachas, she'echad nasan l'chaver makas lechi, ha'yedei aktata avor Kaddish. I watched somebody slap someone else in the face in shul for trying to steal his Kaddish. It's in a tshuva from the early 1800s. He says, I watched to get physical.
Also to be about shul, small.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, every shul was small then. Yeah, every shul. That's interesting. He says, I watched a fist fight about this, and he says, and then he continues, and he says the mile is Kaddish Yishmael. Then except then he brings V'im Kol Zeh. He says Balach Some Sefer. He says there's a truth for the Some Sefer. The Some Sefer also writes that everyone could say Kaddish together, and it's not a problem. He says, and the Some Sefer was not known to be a Mechadish. The Some Sefer didn't like change. This is Rebbe Oppenheim's argument. The Some Sefer didn't like change. The Some Sefer wasn't someone who was comfortable with changing, and the Some Sefer himself in a Tshuva and Yeridea allows this change to happen, and he allows Kaddish to be done as a group. So he says, you see that this is the appropriate thing to do. This is what modernity requires, and this is what's needed. Now the Aruch LaNer responds, and he says, Timati derech klal, I don't understand this whole thing that you wrote over. You called this a takana gedele v'yashara, like a straight and good takana to fix this. L'shanas minig Yisrael shenagu b'chol medinas Ashkenaz v'Poland. Zeh yosim mishalosh me yashana b'katish yasam shem kolech levade. You with like a flick of a pen, you uprooted a minig that Yadis Poland and Ashkenaz has for 300 years. We don't do it like this. How could you call this a good minig? He says Tamati l'shmaya dvarim kelu. You think it depends on the size of the shul? Whatever the minig the kila was doing is called a minig. Anything different than that is a shinei minig. It doesn't matter the size of the shul, because it gets complicated. He says, "Mashatala mar be'ilan gadol," in the Chum Sefer v'amar halahu yasayna his chadshus. The Chum Sefer hated new things. Aval pika and hit the lemer kadeshim yachad. He was makel about this because he brings the yavitz. It's not even true. He in the tshuva over there, he's looking for a whole pshara to work it out and whatever. He's only bringing that in the event you can't figure out a pshara, you have a yavitz to be saimachan that says that, you see from the Nusach of that he himself was not so happy with it. He wasn't looking for the change. He would say optimal is not to do it, but you can't. So he says you're misrepresenting, so to speak, the Chum Sefer. He says yes, it's true that Chum Sefer brings the yavitz. Now, okay, one could say. Some Sefer would say this is an irrevocable problem over here. This is an irrevocable problem. You have a big shul, it's too big. So then he continues on. He says this to the Sfardim. This is just a little token racism. You're welcome. He says Mashanagu Sfardim. Ein b'yadein l'leida al managu. Can we have no idea what they're doing by them? V'kapanim yeshchilik rab in Sfardim and Ashkenazim. Sfardim called tefillas and makelis b'kol shava. They all sing together. V'leichur or mir. Ashkenazim, we don't daven like this. I don't know Sfardim. Don't tell me Sfardim. This is what he says. And he continues. And he continues on this vein. He says, "Mela, I come out that it's aser." And Nishna Dem, he throws in at the end that according to certain Mekubalim, and we'll if we have time, we'll get to this. You're not even doing anything for your father if you do it as a group. If you do it as a group, it's nothing. And Mela says you have to do it individual, and that's how he sticks. That's what Aruch LaNer ends up. Now, what's interesting?
I'm not saying what the Isser is, just because that was the minig.
The minig, we don't change minhagim. That's what he's saying. We don't change minhagim. Now, what's interesting is Aruch LaNer is like a little out of character. You wouldn't expect him to harp on such a kleinigkeit. Frat after the Yavitz and the Chum Sefer, Gedolei who preceded him seemed to have not taking it so seriously. Meaning the subtext of the Chum Sefer and the Yavitz is that like their attitude is like big deal. Like what are you getting all worked up about this? Like this is not worth fighting over. So the truth is that Aruch LaNer lived in the beginning of Reform and Conservative in Germany and Haskalah, and him and Rav Shamshon Falhirsch, both of them who in their own way are very liberal, very strongly were against this. And the reason is simple, because shul changes is opening the door to Reform and Conservative, meaning most of what the Reform and Conservative were trying to do in the early 1800s, and we've spoken about this, Barichas, was make changes to shul. The Nusach, which one in, which one out, a little shorter, a little quicker, a little this, a little that. The minute that the normative Orthodox, 6 minutes, normative Orthodox rabbinate would say, we're good to go, you can make changes, then you lose your whole ground to fight with the Reform and conservatives. So the Aruch LaNer, if we're allowed to say this, needs to be understood in context, meaning because the arguments that he's making are not so strong to go against what the Ivitz is saying. Exactly, you're not proving me a halacha like the Ivitz and the Chassam Sofer and no. He brings Mea Mekubalim, which we'll get to in a second. It comes from 1 second. We'll get to, but and the Ivitz and the Chassam Sofer and even Reb Kveger seem to be much more open to this pshara that everyone could say it together to do like the Saradim and solve the problem. And Ramela, it seems like Risham Flourish and the Aruch LaNer is more of a reactive tshuva, meaning it's a preventative tshuva. It's to prevent the slippery slope of like conservatism, conservative and reform from breaking it. Now, Lemaisa, what's interesting is we know of some people who give tzavos to their children not to say Kaddish as a group. Rabbi Naftali Amsterdam, who's one of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter's primary talmidim, and this is like the irony of this, because Rabbi Yisrael seemed to have been very permissive and said, I'll be mevater on it or whatever. So Rabbi Naftali Amsterdam, in his tzavah to his children, writes as follows. He says, Be'inyan amiris HaKaddish, in my life, I've never said Kaddish, as a group of people. The kol shegem b'shleisha, for sure not with 3 people. I hold it's aser. So what are you doing? I'm saying you're being marba kadeshim. We're not marba kadeshim for no reason. You're not being mitzi anybody. You're not doing anything. What are you doing? He says, and what do you think it's a benefit to the niftar if it's shulaikadin? The niftar gets nothing from it, he says. Unless you're mamish, your timing is impeccable. Then with a conductor and their timing is impeccable. So then maybe I could hear it. He says, who must, I think means Rishon Salanter, that there's no point in saying it together, which is why Yisrael, although he was holding Bemi Mavater, didn't offer to say it together with the guy. And Yisrael, when he had this other guy who had a yard, said, "It's no problem, you have it." Yisrael was Mavater. Right, exactly, not willing to say it together. So it sounds like Rishon Salanter, even though Mitzarechad he was super Mavater, Mitzacheni was saying like, there's no point, there's no benefit in saying it if you're not saying it by yourself. Then he says, V'hinei Ata, he says he's aware. Naftali Amsterdam is writing, this tells you where we're holding with the minig. Ata Omer Masara B'Yachad, Ve'en Zeh Klum. V'yoser Tov Shalei Tagid Kaddish Klal Olav. Alai, Better don't say Kaddish on me b'chlal if you don't say it the way that I want it. So, Rabbi Naftali Amsterdam is really saying what we've heard of people doing, is that there is such a minig of insisting on this, meaning he's living in the tkufa already where the minig is changing, and the minig is becoming to do it like the Sfaradim and to be more communal about it. Yeah, exactly. He's more describing it in Meli Nights. And he's not the only one. There is a few different other less famous, let's just say, people who instructed as follows, other yakis who instructed in their tzavos or etc. not to do it. And incidentally, the Chazon Ish, also in his minig, and in Letterman Shul, I believe today, they do not say Kaddish as a group. In Letterman, there's a sign that says, if you have a reason to say Kaddish, please see the Gabbai, and you'll be assigned, a slot. Yeah, you'll be assigned a slot. And it will depend on who you are, who you know, and what your net worth is, and all the regular things that it always depends on when we're divvying up kibbudim and shul. You know what I'm saying? That's what it says in the Letterman shul. Now, just to circle back to the it seems the Chazon Ish held like that. That's what it seems to be based on. Now, the Tzitz Eliezer obviously not this. Yeah. Incidentally, the Tzitz Eliezer in a long tshuva about it also, that where he collects a lot of the stray. The Tzitz Eliezer, of course, says that the minig today stay it all together. And I'm mamlitz on the minig of the Sfaradim say it together, and it's a good minig, and it avoids machlekes, and there's nothing more important than avoiding machlekes, and kayidua, when shuls don't do this, how much fights come up, and which is why, overall, the Tzitz Eliezer is just reflecting, he's really just a mirror for what the normative minig became. Now, what's interesting is the Kabbalah part. I just want to get to the Kabbalah part for a second, about not saying Kaddish as a group. So, it's like this. Yeah, 1 second. It comes from Zidichev, really. It's like Isaac of Kamarna in his Shulchan Atar. I don't see it here, but I'll tell you what I remember. It's like Isaac of Kamarna in the Shulchan Atar, which is like it's an alternate Shulchan Aruch. It's a Shulchan Aruch that's based purely on Kabbalah. The Piskei Tshuva is actually, the most popular sefer that came out, who knows how long, probably. At least it was. Quotes him, every page brings the Shulchan Atar. It's all the Kabbalistic things. The Chassidim are very into it. The Shulchan Atar. It's Isaac Kamarna, who was a Rizig Talmid Chacham, but a very interesting person. He quotes from his uncle. I believe his uncle he's quoting is Tzviyash Zidichev, the Zidichev Rebbe, who said that Apisaid, saying Kaddish as a group, does nothing for the nifter, and not only does it nothing, it's harmful to the nifter. You say Kaddish, not only is it like not good, it's bad. And because of that, there was a minig in lot of different, Kreiser. 1 second. To be makbid, not to say here. I think I have it. 1 second.
Every time you see that by Hasidim, it's like Friday night.
What, not to do in his group?
One before Kigavna.
So here, so first of all, the Divrei Chaim was makbid. The Divrei Chaim in the Darkei Chaim, which is the Minhagim of the Divrei Chaim, it says as follows: Zel Shen Rabbeinu Kaddish Etzal, Rabbeinu Kaddish Hay makbid ma'od, shelo yomru shnei anashim yachad Kaddish. Afilu hay asar chiyuvim b'beis hamedrash lo yomru Kaddish rak echad. Shay matal geirul b'neim mishazacha zacha. Hamachat saak Rabbeinu lama hotzruchu lichta b'shulchan aruch din k'tima b'chiyuvim l'Kaddish. Im kol chiyuvim hay mutarim lem b'yachad Kaddish. The Divrei Chaim gave a shrai once. What's this whole dinim for if it's not because it's us to do it as a group? Now, the Yaakov Emden was even on the same thing, and Taka said, don't write it, right? That's the Rechaim reaction. Now, trying to find the Zidchayev part, I can't find the Zidchayev part. The Zidchayev part says that it's not even a schos for the Nefter, and because of that, there was some, the more Kabbalah-centric a person is, the more makbid they would be, not to say Kaddish as a group. And the less Kabbalah-centric their worldview is, the less they'd have a reason to be makbid, and they would just say the new minig is to do this.
It's funny, because
Now,
you see them in the side, them,
I'm saying it as groups?
no, that's saying as a group, and they're like more like they would more that they'd be.
Yeah, and b'chalaifin, I'm just saying, b'chalaifin, it's interesting is that the Aruch LaNer, who's the last person you'd expect it from, is one of the strongest, defenses of not saying Kaddish as a group, and as additionally Rizal Salanter and Naftali Amsterdam, who seem to be of that mind, although the Ksav Sefer and the Chsam Sefer and the Yavitz and probably Rukveger and many other Gedalim throughout there, it's very, very regular mainstream Gedalim felt it was not an issue, which is why the minute Quran, I think now, it's interesting. Just one postscript. 1 more minute. Postscript. I was looking at the Nitei Gabriel on Avelis to see who he brings down. Like, as he collects all the different minhagim, whatever. Yeah, Nitei Gabriel. And this is why it was humorous to me. And in here, he's quoting all the different places we say it's mutter. And he brings Ken Kasav Shut Divrei Geras, a guy named Mendel Steinhardt, Simon Zion, Zel Sheinei. I want to read what he says from Mendel Steinhardt. He says, Masha, that's why it's kind of cute. 1 second. Masha Shemata Aleinu, Lemer Shetakinu B'dinasein, Shekol Avelim Yemri Kulam Kaddish Echad. It's like a response. He's writing to his Rebbe. I forgot who Divrei Geras is too, but he's writing to a Rebbe of his. He says, this that you heard, that we made this new innovation, that we all say Kaddish as a group. He says, Tshuva, emes shematzinu b'achronim dei shenis miris Kaddish. We did this. Taka, tremendous amount of details in Achronim. We're supposed to say Kaddish. L'fiyah takana shetekninu batla machlekes. Teisili b'dvarim she'en la'em maveh b'talmud b'bavli Yerushalmi v'Rishonim. There's no source for any of this din, not in the Bavli, the Yerushalmi, the Rishonim. It's all floating in the luft. It's just based on girsayis and a medrash. They're fine. And then he goes at it. So the Reb Mendel Steinhardt, in like a strong defense of it, says like, of course it's dinim in the Shulchan Aruch. Of course there's reams and reams of dinim. But come on, this is like dinim that are connected to nothing. These are just minhagim that form to avoid machlekes. Today, the best way to avoid machlekes is to just ditch this whole set of minhagim and say Kaddish as a group. That's the best way to avoid machlekes. Now he quotes this. I wonder if he knows that Mendel Steinhardt was considered half a Moscow. Like he's a Talmud Chacham, and he's a nephew of Rav Yosef Steinhardt, who was like one of the Gedolei Hadar in Germany. But Mendel Steinhardt, in the same Divrei Geras, tried to mibatel this of Kitnius, for example, which I don't think that the Nitei Gabriel would find humorous. I just wonder if like he, it just to me it's interesting. He's quoting Mamasha, I think. Here, anyhow, that's the story.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.